Welcome to In the Envelope, an awards podcast. I am your host, Jack Smart, awards editor at Backstage. I'm here to give you a front row seat to the Emmys, Oscars, SAG, and Tonys races. Who is in the running? What makes an award-worthy performance? And what are the secrets to giving one? These intimate, inspirational conversations with some of today's most talented stars provide you, dear listener, the kind of craft and career advice that could win you a statue of your own, and maybe, just maybe, a tantalizing glimpse in the envelope.
Between stage and screen, what I do, my work feels the same. There's the same thought processes and the same intensity of thought, hopefully. As some great British actor once said, it's the same as film, only shouting.
So, here we are.
Hello.
Hello. It is time for the Oscars.
Oh my goodness.
Is this it? This is our big again. Hey, is this our third year of doing pre-Oscars?
I think it is, yeah.
Content?
Yeah.
Wow. And we today have a leading actor Oscar nominee.
Yeah.
Jonathan Pryce.
And that was the only other time we had Willem Dafoe, right?
Yeah, we had Willem Dafoe for The Florida Project, I believe.
Yeah.
So I think he was nominated last year and the year before, but it was the year before for Florida Project. And this year, it's worth pointing out, this is a shorter than usual Oscar season. The Oscars are earlier in February, and so everything's a bit squeezed.
Yeah, a little compressed, yeah.
A little compressed. Everyone's quite busy. I'm always busy this time of year, but it seems so are the stars and actors, which is why I'm very pleased that we were able to get Jonathan Pryce.
Yeah, definitely. And let's not forget BAFTAs as well.
And he's nominated for BAFTAs. In fact, he just left to get on a plane to London to go be at the BAFTAs. That's pretty amazing.
Oh, the life of a film star.
Yeah. And we did talk about how there's the press aspect of the two popes. He's never seen a film more. He's never promoted a film more. And yeah, with good reason. It's a big, far-reaching film. It's on Netflix. And it's also, he's playing the current pope. There's a lot to get into.
Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And what a great opportunity to hear about how somebody builds, a real life person who's very much in the public eye. And yeah, no pressure with 1.2 billion Catholics in the world who could weigh in on his portrayal of this, this fictional portrayal of this real person.
Yeah, and I thought especially so hearing his process throughout his whole career, actually. And one thing that stood out, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but that really stood out to me was the fact that he has stood up for himself with directors and with other cast members.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure that stood him in good stead for this role.
Yeah, for this role specifically. Yeah. Yeah, it was very cool to hear about the many different ways that one develops a craft is also about developing, like a philosophy and a way of asserting yourself and creating boundaries. And that all takes practice.
Yeah. And instinct, apparently.
And instinct. And of course, it comes back to the training. We talked about the training. And Jonathan he's a legend. He's got a lot of practice in this stuff. I find sometimes, I will say, I'm just going to say this doesn't apply to our podcast, but sometimes you ask someone about stage versus screen, like advice or technique or what are the differences, and the answers are super boring. Or like the question is boring. Like there's just something that's not interesting about learning about how an actor does stage versus screen. Yeah. But with Jonathan just now, I've heard things I've never heard before, which is always great. And I think this is, again, a textbook thing where somebody who's maybe they're a theater trained actor who's trying to figure out how to do film or trying to see, really, are they just two of the exact same processes, and one is an audience and one is a camera lens, this is a great interview for that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And quite a hilarious quote on that subject, actually, as well, which we won't give away.
Yeah, he's a funny guy. He's an odd... Did you see Brazil? Like, are you a...
I saw Brazil, years ago, and when I was going through a big Terry Gilliam alternative phase.
Me too. Yeah, I'm a big Terry Gilliam, Jonathan Pryce collaboration fan.
Definitely.
Shout out to Jim Smart, my dad, who's definitely his favorite actor is Jonathan Pryce.
Oh, cool.
This one's for him.
All right, we should probably get to it for him then.
Yes, let's get to this amazing interview with Jonathan. This podcast is brought to you by Backstage, the world's #1 casting platform. Listen, a lot of the guests on In the Envelope, an awards podcast, used Backstage at the beginning of their careers. It's how they are now in the running for Emmy, for Oscar, for Tony, etc. If you are at the beginning of your career as an artist, here's what you do. You go to backstage.com/subscribe and enter the code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free 30-day trial. That's right, free 30-day trial if you go to backstage.com/subscribe and enter the code ENVELOPE. All you got to do then is make a profile, upload a headshot, and start applying to jobs, to the thousands of casting notices that are uploaded every day, which you can filter online to match your specific talents, your specific needs, your specific looks. Get that dream started today. Check out that free 30-day trial, backstage.com/subscribe, enter the code ENVELOPE. Let's do it. Stage and screen legend Jonathan Pryce has built a career of fascinating, varied characters, from his breakout in Brazil, the first of many collaborations with Terry Gilliam, to hits like Evita, Tomorrow Never Dies, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Game of Thrones. Born in Wales, trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London and the Everyman Theatre in Liverpool, and winning 2 Tonys and 2 Oliviers for his work on stage, Jonathan is now being recognized for his portrayal of Pope Francis in Netflix's The Two Popes, earning him a Leading Actor Academy Award nomination. Here's our interview with Jonathan Pryce. Jonathan, have you done podcasts before? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes?
This isn't my first podcast.
Good, okay.
No.
And it's not your first time talking to Backstage either. You were on a cover recently.
Yes,
Great.
yeah.
So, is your whole life just doing these interviews now and talking about the two popes?
More or less, yes.
Are you tired of talking about it?
Well, I've been talking about it since Telluride. It's the end of August. Mm-hmm. And I did a play, as you know, on Broadway.
Right.
The end of last year for 3 months. And talking about it all through that, flying on my days off was flying to LA, flying to London, to the Hamptons, to Toronto. Mm-hmm. And then once I finished the play, I've been traveling all over Europe and to Buenos Aires and LA and New York, London, Paris.
And the Vatican as well?
Well, we had a screening in Rome
Cool.
to which the Vatican were invited.
Okay.
And that all went down very well. There was a number of priests came and the odd bishop and a cardinal. And Cardinal Turkson, who's a close friend of Benedict's and a friend of Francis.
Cool.
He said he liked the film. He thought Francis would like the film. And asked for a DVD to take.
To Francis?
To show it to Francis, yeah. So we haven't had a reaction from him
yet. We don't know for sure.
No.
Much like the movie is patched together from a bunch of different things they've said on the record, but it's largely an imagined thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've talked about this a lot, but playing a real person, I'm sure you've studied so much his footage. He's got footage for decades.
Yeah.
Did you study his mannerisms, his accent, everything?
Yeah, did all that.
How many languages did you speak in the film?
I spoke Spanish, English with a Spanish accent, a bit of Latin and French.
And how much of that was brand new?
Well, I said French, Italian, just because I speak French. But
okay.
I learned everything that was in the script. I learned. So I had a bit of Spanish, a bit of Italian, but usually it got me through ordering a meal in a restaurant, and that'd be about it. Okay. But it was it was a joy to do it, and it's Yeah, it was great, especially making the speech from the balcony, his kind of the celebratory speech.
Yes.
To get to do that in Italian was really good.
In front of an actual huge crowd?
No, about 3 people standing down there. But when you see it, it's extraordinary. There's the CGI in this film is so good.
Yeah.
You don't notice the joints because we weren't allowed to film anywhere in or near the Vatican.
Right.
So we've got scenes in front of St. Peter's and scenes looking back at the crowds when he was kind of inaugurated as Pope. Mm-hmm. We absolutely cannot tell. No. I can't tell. And when I saw the footage of in front of St. Peter's, I thought that's really good. They managed to get some real, background. Mm-hmm. And anyway, it's fantastic.
It's remarkable.
So because we didn't get that kind of cooperation from the Vatican,
right?
We built the Sistine Chapel.
Yes, I was wondering about that.
At Cinecittà.
Yeah,
and it was absolutely fantastic. It was a complete recreation of the Sistine Chapel, minus the ceiling because the studio wasn't high enough. Oh, so the ceiling is CGI.
Okay, CGI. Okay.
But the rest is, it was real. It's 5 centimeters, just a few inches bigger than the real Sistine Chapel, so that Mark Tildesley, the designer, could boast that he'd built the biggest Sistine Chapel in the world.
Gotcha. Without the ceiling, of course.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because it really does feel, it's almost shot like a documentary, and like you said, you can't tell that it's not really filmed there, certainly.
No. And you when you were there, there was a kind of aura that you were actually in the chapel itself. Okay. It did feel like it.
Sure. Well, I imagine a lot of this process of creating this, of playing this character had to involve putting yourself in a mindset, in a spiritual as well as a physical mindset of I am wearing these robes, I am in this Sistine Chapel with the Pope.
Yeah.
I'm a cardinal. You know. Did you? What were your first impressions, like when you got this role?
Well, I was nervous at first because I thought, a living Pope, I'm not going to please everybody.
Sure.
But I think because I felt such enormous empathy towards him as a man, because when he was created Pope, he was the first Pope that I ever thought was speaking to me and thousands like me, not about faith or religion, but about the world at large, about society, and changes that had to be made concerning the environment, the economy, the inequality, the refugee crisis, which still exists. So I saw him as a leader and an inspirational figure, as well as being a leader of 1.2, I think it is, billion Catholics. Mm-hmm. When Ted, the head of Netflix, when we were in Buenos Aires, and we were talking about how Netflix was expanding into South America. And he referred to this audience of 1.2 billion, and I thought that we had 1.2 billion subscribers. He was actually talking about the Catholic Church. Anyway, I'm sure they're not far off 1.2 billion subscribers
at this point.
Yeah, but it wasn't difficult to get into his mindset because I felt great, as I said, sympathy for him. Yeah. And it was, it helped that I look a little like him.
Yes, sure.
I discovered that far from my having to learn how to walk like him, he actually walks like me anyway.
Okay.
He's got a slight. I've got a slight limp. He's got a slight limp. But no, it was. And I watched lots of YouTube of him as well. Not only the kind of the present day stuff, but there is some footage of when he was in Buenos Aires.
Very cool.
And when he was a particular piece of footage when he was being interviewed by his fellow cardinals for talking about his possible involvement with the colonels. So sort of darker side of him.
Yes, which the film touches on.
Yeah, but it was all great.
Yeah. But it's good to hear that you were nervous. I almost feel like if you weren't nervous taking on one of the biggest public figures in the public eye, like you said, 1.2 billion people.
Yeah. I
mean, no pressure, right?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes it felt to me when I think about it, because I don't think about it very often, this kind of thing. But I've taken on roles in the theatre that are kind of iconic roles that people, My Fair Lady, and everyone goes, "Oh, you'll never be as good as Rex Harrison," or Oliver. I remember I did Oliver in the West End playing Fagin. And I would go out to the stage door in between shows to sign autographs after the matinee. And there were a few people there. I signed the autographs, and there was one man left there, and he was, I was in automatic smiling mode.
Sure.
And I was signing his program for him, and he was saying, "It's marvellous, Mr. Pryce, absolutely wonderful. Yes, thank you so much." And I handed the program back to him, and as he turned away, he said, "You were just this much behind Ron Moody."
Behind?
It's so great.
Behind?
And I was still smiling while I realised what he'd said. Right, "Oi, come back."
Hey, wait a minute.
But...
ranking these performances.
Yes. So somebody's going to come up and say, "You're just this much behind the real Pope."
The real Pope.
He's very good.
Right. I mean, that's the person that you have to go off of. The best you can do is an approximation. What you try to do, I mean, it's certainly not an impersonation, but you have to get the character of the man. Right. It's more text-based. It's more based on the script.
It is, yeah.
As always, right?
And the script is incredibly good. And so all that is a given. You know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it's just how to say it, just how to bring it across.
You're not shoehorning in some, like you said, impersonation or some impression of the real Pope. You're doing the script's Pope.
Yeah.
And the movie acknowledges that it almost acknowledges, I feel like, that it's a kind of fiction, that it's imagining these conversations between these men.
Because the odd thing is you do see the real the two popes
at the end,
the real people at the end. And when the first time I saw it at a screening, I thought, I don't know if that's right, whether it kind of undermines what Tony Hopkins and I have been doing. But it actually gives it some sense of authority, because you do see these two men greeting each other with great affection.
Yes. Yeah.
And you see that they must have come a point, because they were antagonistic towards each other, even our characters in the film as well. And as Tony and I have gone on this journey of discovering that we could, get on and possibly like each other, then when you do see the real people greeting each other, it's actually very touching. I think very moving. And it validates everything we've done for the previous 2 hours.
Yeah, you can see them maybe watching soccer together.
Well, I don't know about that. But,
maybe.
Yeah.
And
certainly
you mentioned,
having a nice cup of tea, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And very, very intense but lighthearted conversations about the world.
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins, Tony, did you you said that you were nervous to work with him too? Well,
apprehensive is more rather than nervous. So I'm apprehensive about any project you go into, which I think is a healthy feeling to have. If you go in overconfident and you're going to mess it up somewhere. But I'd always been a fan of his, and he's a fellow Welshman. And we'd worked together for like 27, 28 years ago. We're both on a recording of Under Milk Wood, where he plays first voice and I play second voice.
Oh, interesting.
So it was produced by George Martin, and we also did a live performance of it after we'd made the CD.
Cool. With
people like Tom Jones was on it, and Catherine Zeta-Jones, and half of Wales is on it.
Jones.
But I hadn't come across him or met him in the intervening years. So, he's a big star, and rightly so. And you don't know how. I mean, I've worked with big stars before, and some are great and some are not so great.
Sure.
But he was absolutely wonderful. And it's a bit like you see the relationship between the two popes, how they skirting around each other at the beginning, not knowing what each other is really like. And then they go on this arc where they end up tangoing together.
Yes.
And I mean, that was me and Tony, and
cool.
We've never actually tangoed in public together, but I'm sure that day will come. Yes. Maybe at the Oscars.
At the Oscars.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's safe to say it mirrored your arc with him.
Yeah.
Mirrored the arc of the film. So maybe you're using that dynamic between the two of you in the portrayal.
I don't know. You don't consciously use it. It's only in retrospect when you're sitting down doing a podcast and things that you think, yes. That's what my relationship is like.
Yeah.
Because you're not, while you're living it, you're not judging it.
No,
you're
right.
not assessing it. But working with him was an absolute delight. It was great, really great.
Yeah, I'm on this podcast. We always try to get at the hub of an actor's creative process and of their preparation and of course training. I would love to hear about your kind of beginnings on this whole path. Is it safe to say there's not a set process for each role? You mentioned is there a checklist of when you're impersonating, especially a real person? You mentioned the walk and the voice and the...
Yeah, no, I don't have a process. I suppose I'm much more an instinctive actor. Even when rehearsing a theatre piece, my preparation is nearly always text-based. And what I don't do, because I can't do it, is learn a script before I go into rehearsals.
Okay.
I learn while I'm doing it. And that's always been the way. I'm the last one to put down the book, as it were.
Okay.
I'll carry, rather than fumble trying to remember the lines,
sure.
I'd be happier carrying the book. And I'm quite adept at that.
Yeah.
I don't have to, stop, pause and think. Many directors these days want their cast to learn the lines before they go into rehearsal. Because the director feels he can't do his or her work until everyone knows their lines. But that's, if you all start on the same page, as it were, right. You go on that journey together and discover things together.
Yeah,
I've even found, especially with younger actors now who have to audition 2, 3, 4, 5 times.
Oh, yeah.
By the time they come, if they get the part, by the time they come to start rehearsals, they know it.
They know it.
And
maybe they're
they
set.
have, because they've had no direction from the director during these auditions.
Right.
They've had to build all these preconceived notions about what the character is like, what the play is about,
right,
without knowing anything about the character they're working with. So I'd prefer, that's my only rehearsal technique, is that we all learn it together at the same time. I also find I never have, even when I started. I can do it if I have to, but learning off the page, I don't find it easy or satisfactory.
You want to work with others.
It's also when I know what I'm doing and why I'm saying it, it just goes in.
Right.
And that goes for Shakespeare as well.
You're on your feet, you're hearing the other people's lines, you're getting to respond to that.
And if you know why you're saying something, I have to say this because of what they've just said to me.
Right.
But Shakespeare is the easiest to learn of any of them because of the rhythms and the musicality of it.
Yeah.
But that's my only technique. And in a film, of course, you are required to know your lines before you get on the set. Yes. Because there's very little time for rehearsal.
Right.
Although with this, because most of the scenes are just Tony and I, we would rehearse.
It is quite theatery as a film, as a two-hander.
Theatrical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not theatery.
Not theatery? Oh, theatrical.
I think you've just invented a word.
Yes. It's a theatrical film, and it's based on a theater text. So you were both at home
I never
that.
knew, I didn't know it was a play. It had never been performed. Right. And when I got the screenplay, there's no based on a play. So I never had that. I think I'd have... I'm glad I didn't know, because I think I would have been aware of its theatricality if I'd known.
Yeah.
So it's a real surprise that it had been a play.
Okay.
But of course, it is opened up to much more than a stage play, which is confined by 3 walls. So we see it goes into Pope Francis's background when he becoming a priest and making the choices he did. And I think it's a wonderful, extraordinary piece of filmmaking by Fernando Meirelles, the director. Often you see a stage play that's adapted for film, and they think, we've got to do exteriors. And for no reason at all, people will be driving a car or, running down a street or whatever. And this doesn't feel, it feels totally organic.
Yeah.
Yes, of course they're outside in the gardens talking. Of course they're in another part of the garden. And they're in and out of the Vatican and palaces and helicopters. And so it is very much a film,
Right. And
the other film that I did, which was based on a play, was Glengarry Glen Ross.
Oh, sure.
Even that was hardly opened up. I think they had I forget where, an exterior scene somewhere with maybe Jack Lemmon going to the house where he was trying to sell the land. I can't remember properly. But that felt like a film still, even though it was contained in the walls.
So they do have to be approached differently, stage and screen. But it sounds like for film, you do try to kind of maybe preserve the rehearsal aspect of you're trying to stay in the moment and
absolutely,
responding to your fellow, your co-stars, so give you the most inspiration. And the director.
Yeah.
And I imagine there are some films and TV shows where you get many takes and you get to do lots of wildly different things, and others where you don't have very much time at all.
Yeah.
And you're rushing through maybe 2 takes and you hope you get it right.
Yeah. Well, that's the method I prefer. I don't like endless takes.
Oh, okay. You want the quick. Okay.
I don't like endless takes when the director doesn't know what he's doing. And therefore is asking for more takes so that they can then make the choices in the editing suite.
I see.
And it's the sign of a bad director when you said, "Okay, let's do it again," and you say, what do you want me to do? Little faster?
Oh, boy.
Okay.
I see.
And then maybe a little slower. Okay. Maybe a bit lighter, a bit darker, bit.
Interesting.
It's
horrendous,
and it's like doing a voiceover for a commercial, where they say, "Okay, a little brighter, a little darker now." And I used to question it when I was doing voiceovers, but I just do it now. There's no point.
Well, and that makes sense for voiceover, but I've never heard that for direct. If you can tell a director doesn't have a specific vision in mind, it must be miserable.
Of course, there was a particular director I worked with, and the first day was like that. And I went to him the second day, and I said, "Look, I can't work like this.
This is how I need to." Yeah.
If you lighter, darker, we've got to know what direction we're going and what the character's motivation is, why he's saying it.
Right.
If it comes out lighter, that's fine. If it comes out darker, that's fine. But darker, lighter doesn't mean anything to me.
No.
And he was very interested to hear that.
Okay.
He'd never directed before, and he had an assumption of how you directed.
Right. The superficial notes, I mean, that is one way of doing it.
Yeah.
I suppose that director is then able to draw from multiple takes, but you would prefer to have conversations with the director beforehand about the character and with your co-stars as well.
Yeah.
Which kind of director is Terry Gilliam like?
He's...
it's safe to say you've worked with him the most.
What's interesting about Terry, and that I discovered when we made Brazil especially, was that he doesn't claim to know anything about acting. And he knows what he wants to hear eventually. And he certainly knows how he wants it to look visually.
Right.
But he's employed to do the visuals. You're employed to do the acting.
Oh.
And it's a bit like that. And it's I've watched him struggle with actors who don't know really what who want more direction.
Right.
And I want to say to them, you're not going to get it. Just work it out for yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
But what he does is he has a great vision of what the film should be like and will be like, and he's very excited about it all. So there's quite a creative feeling on the set. You don't feel you're just filling in somebody's vision by numbers or rote. He wants your input, and if you go too far in the extreme, he'll pull you back.
Gotcha.
But it was interesting. Is that my first? Well, interesting for me. Anyway, I don't know if your listeners find it interesting, but I did 2 films when I was quite young in the mid-70s, one after another with Stephen Frears, directing 2 films for the BBC. And in both films I played the leading role. But in the second film especially, before every take, Stephen would say, "Jonathan," and then he'd run his hand down in front of his face. To remind me to make my face a blank canvas onto which, that thing of whoever talks to me, you will see what my reaction is, just from nothing on my face, but what you hear. And I thought for a long time that was film acting, that the sort of
hand in front of the
calmer, sort of blank face look or whatever would work,
as opposed to theater.
Yeah, and then I would go and see films that had this approach, and I would think, God, there's nothing happening. There's
you didn't like your...
No energy, it's deadly, it's not what I was thinking I was doing.
Right.
And then I get to work with Terry, and far from saying, "Jonathan, less, less, less," he was more, more, more.
Gotcha.
And it was more like the work I was doing on stage.
Very cool.
Yeah. And he also does. It's quite rare that he shoots a close-up.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And Brazil is shot almost entirely on a wide-angle lens.
Yeah.
And either full length or waist up. And I remember looking at rushes with him one day and seeing and thinking, "Oh, that looks quite good, that shot of me." And it was the only shot that he used a 50mm lens, which is like a portrait lens, in the movie.
Oh.
And he acknowledged that I quite liked that shot, and he never used it again.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's
everyone has their different techniques.
I don't know. The difference is, I don't feel between stage and screen what I do. My work feels the same. There's the same thought processes and the same intensity of thought, hopefully. And but it's as some great British actor once said, it's the same as film, only shouting theatre. So you just talk a bit louder. But it is there's something more happens between you and an audience than in film.
Yes.
I think what happens in film is between me and the other actors. And what happens in the theatre is obviously what happens between the actors, but it also is what happens between the actors and the audience. And how the slight shifts in the mood and the atmosphere of the audience can change the performance.
Is it safe to say they're another scene partner, the live audience?
Yeah. Whereas, they could be a bad scene partner sometimes.
Sure, absolutely. And that makes you a better actor to work with a bad scene partner.
Work with a bad audience.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, the fun I find is, in a long run especially, is kind of harnessing an audience, because you can hear the play that they want to hear. Okay. And you say to yourself, "No, that's not the play I'm going to give you."
Whoa.
And you can shift things so you can kill the laughter, or get the laughter, modulate the laughter.
Whoa.
And that's fun to do.
That sounds like a high level of craftsmanship to be able to. Well,
most actors do. I mean, you come off stage thinking. Well, the danger is you can come off stage judging the audience and thinking, "Oh God, that was terrible. They laughed all the way through it." And you think that's a terrible show. And yet, when you come out the stage door and you meet them and you talk to people who've seen it, they've had a just as valid an experience.
Sure.
But
so it doesn't do.
And you have to not let that affect you. You mustn't let it affect you and you think this is a bad thing that they're laughing at this point.
Right.
Although I toured some of America and China with the production of The Merchant of Venice about 4 or 5 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And in China, it was all done with surtitles. Mm-hmm. And I was playing Sherlock, and there's a scene where his daughter's gone, taken all his money. His friend Tubal has gone looking for the daughter, reports back to him that his daughter has given this ring, which was a gift from Sherlock's wife to him, had given it away for a monkey.
Uh-huh.
And that, for me, and with the lines that follow, it's a very tragic moment.
Yes.
And he says, I wouldn't have given that ring for a wilderness of monkeys.
Right.
It was so important to him. And the English-speaking audiences in America and Britain, they, I think, found it just as moving a moment.
Right.
China, they found it hilarious.
Really?
And I was thinking, why is this? I'm doing the same things. I'm looking as sorrowful and as hurt and pained as I was anywhere else.
Yeah.
And because then we talked to the interpreter we were working with, and she said, it's the word monkey.
Okay.
And the Chinese audience, when they saw this monkey, for some reason, they thought it was hilarious.
Okay.
So,
but it changes that whole moment.
Yeah. So instead of our changing what we did on stage, or even the words, we changed the surtitle. So instead, she gave it away for nothing. We made it an innocuous word, and they stopped laughing.
How interesting!
Yeah.
That's actual manipulation.
Yeah. But they did find a lot of it very amusing. They found all the gay themes in Merchant of Venice hilarious.
Okay.
And when we asked, we had a Q&A in, I think we were in Guangzhou, and we asked them more questions than they asked us. And one of the company asked, why are you laughing at these gay themes? And one very brave, because it's denied.
Yes, it is.
Homosexuality, and it's any sort of clubs or institutions or anything, they close down almost immediately. And he was very brave to stand up and answer this question. He said, well, in China, we see a relationship like this. We relate it to Holmes and Watson. And we were like, what? And when they watch television of the Holmes and Watson, or the Sherlock Holmes TV thing, to them that's a gay relationship, and it's hilarious.
Oh, and it's hilarious.
Yeah. So I wanted to tell
Holmes
Benedict Cumberbatch he's got a huge gay following in China.
There are some undertones, but it's not. It's more of a subtext than
no. But it's not hilarious either.
Canon.
But
no,
and I think their laughter was one of nervousness as well.
I was going to say,
because there were lots of gay guys in the company, and when we had this social event, and they were asking this young Chinese guy, where is there a gay bar? Where'd you go? And he said, no, I am not gay. None of my friends are gay. I don't know any gays. I'm nothing. And we were like, hey, calm down. You're all right. You're with friends. It's okay.
Yeah.
But it was very telling and very tragic, really.
And that really, what an eye-opening experience to travel and just find an entirely new context, especially for a classic.
Yeah.
It's a classic because we know it works, but...
Well, they if they've studied Merchant of Venice at all they've studied is the trial scene.
Okay.
And it's very black and white to them that Sherlock is the bad guy and the rest are the good guys.
As is often maybe traditionally what he's depicted at. Is a little bit more...
Whereas I was presenting a more sympathetic image.
Yes.
A man who was who'd become what he became because of the way he'd been abused and mistreated by the rest of society.
Yeah.
But it was almost like a pantomime to them. It was, it was like Hiss the villain. And they were very happy when I was dragged away to become be baptized as a Christian.
Right.
You could feel the audience, and sometimes there was applause. And
interesting. So that's that thing of
we had that applause in London as well. Then there was a group of happy clappy evangelicals who cheered and applauded when I was told I was to become a Christian.
Okay. Suddenly made it
a bit of an eye-opener.
Yeah, that's that scene partner.
Yeah.
And it's safe to say that
you don't want.
The one you don't want often.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's so interesting, the idea of being able to adjust or manipulate.
Yeah.
I don't want to say manipulate, and that comes back to
manipulate is okay. You try to manipulate and to get them around to your way of thinking. Otherwise, there's no point in being in the theatre.
You're trying to convince someone of something. Yeah.
Because when there was he was the head of the BBC for Lord Reith, and his philosophy for the BBC was to educate, to inform, and to entertain. Mm-hmm. And I have that in the back of my mind.
Interesting.
That, especially with theatre, because when I started in theatre, it was political theatre.
Yes.
And you were trying to change people's minds and inform them.
That says a lot about your philosophy as an actor, I think.
Yeah.
Inform, convince, almost.
Yeah.
And it's safe to say that for film, you don't have that scene partner. Your scene partner is the lens, which is not providing a different energy or a curveball, or it's a bit colder, maybe.
Well, it is, no, except I disagree with it. The scene partner is your actual scene partner.
Sure.
I mean, when I started film acting, because it was a time when film cameras themselves, you were actually shooting on film. Mm-hmm. But the cameras were much more bulky and heavy. And once you got things set up, there wasn't a lot of room for movement or diverging from what you set up in your camera rehearsal. Mm. And I did have a sense that whatever I was doing, I was accommodating the camera.
Interesting.
And maybe sometimes losing contact with the other actor.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
And you were often asked if the camera couldn't get in at a certain angle, you still are asked sometimes to act to a piece of paper stuck to the lens, just off the center of the lens, and or an object, a piece of wood. And I was once asked, "What does it feel like working with a piece of wood?" And I said, "It happens all the time, so it didn't worry me."
Okay, right.
But now cameras are much lighter. Okay. There's much less time for setups of lighting because they're more flexible and can shoot at lower lights. And you can just be, and you can see it in the Two Popes.
Yeah.
You can just be having a conversation
with your
knowing that the camera, instead of you finding the camera will be finding you.
Interesting. And
you just get on with it, and they'll get it.
Right, and that's more of a recent. You've seen that change.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and you have more mobility. You can you can move around a little more.
Yeah,
and you're not having to do the You've gone away from the blank face reaction thing.
Yeah, I might go back to it one day. Might be easier.
It'd be easier to just do nothing.
Yeah, do nothing.
Yeah. Is so much of film. I've sort of always wondered this. Like you mentioned, seeing those films and not being super pleased with how you looked, how the performance turned out. Is so much of film acting just is seeing yourself on screen and then taking what you like from that and abandoning what you don't and kind of adjusting going forward?
You can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered over the years that it's a dangerous thing to do.
Okay.
A lot of actors like to go and look at the monitor after a take and see what they're doing and adjust. And I don't want to see it.
Okay.
I don't want to hear my voice even when they're doing a playback.
Okay.
Because I found again that what you're doing is you're working to your taste and you're adjusting your performance to what you think you want to see.
Ooh.
And that's not always the best way.
No.
And I find you give yourself to sometimes what happens accidentally is the best take.
Cool.
It'll have a different kind of energy to it.
Right.
But I think if you're trying to be truthful to the scene and truthful to whoever you're acting with, it doesn't help to look at the monitor.
Checking in on
Because you adjust your performance, then he or she will go and look, no, I don't like the way I look in that one. I'm going to look like this time. Instead of maintaining the thoughts,
It's a bit of an ego.
You're more concerned with how you look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is not the job in the moment. Certainly.
No.
But you don't have a problem watching the final product.
It depends how successful it's been.
Okay.
I've found... I've watched the Two Popes because I've been travelling to lots of film festivals and screenings and doing Q&As after screenings. Yeah. I found I've watched the Two Popes more than any other film I've watched, because I've seen it a number of times, and then you go to Buenos Aires and for the premiere there, and you think, well, it'd be really interesting to watch it with this audience.
Yeah,
and it was interesting because they had a slightly different take on the film. They didn't laugh as much, mainly because they were reading subtitles.
Oh,
but no monkeys in there.
Right.
I don't think I mentioned.
Different.
But we were told that their response was really good, because a lot of the worry about showing it in Argentina was that did we get it right, the political aspect of the film.
Yeah.
And they were congratulating us and saying they liked the way we had dealt with that whole issue. It's very recent history for Argentina, what happened with the colonels, and it's still very raw and very painful.
Yeah.
And you don't want to abuse that. There's sensitivity towards it.
Yeah. There sounds like there was a lot of pressure on this film. It could have turned out awful. It could have turned out poorly received, and I don't know.
But what's great about it is that because you don't really know. It's not a genre film, so you don't know what the audience is, really. And the audience can think, do I really want to see two old men talking for 2 hours?
Sure.
And then when you're sitting in on a screening, and you that very first laugh that comes with the opening little scene.
Yeah.
It's a big laugh always, and it's a whoosh of laughter.
Yeah.
And you can feel the audience
kind of adjust,
relaxing.
Yeah, totally.
And saying, "Oh, this is okay. We can watch this."
That's interesting too, because a lot of people are probably seeing it in a different way. A lot of people are probably watching this movie not in a theater surrounded by people.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw it just by myself on my couch.
Right.
And I definitely. I found the movie way funnier than I thought it would be, for sure. Yeah. But I imagine, do you have thoughts on how Netflix is changing the industry and changing movies in particular?
Well, I don't, and I don't think it's a bad thing or a negative thing. I mean, what they're doing is in some respects anyway, they're making films that studios won't make. I mean, I can't imagine. I know that a studio wouldn't touch this film.
Sure.
Just on its concept.
Right.
And certainly wouldn't have put the resources into it that Netflix has.
Right. Building a Sistine Chapel.
Yeah. Yeah. And, this film is being seen in cinemas.
Yes.
As is The Irishman and Marriage Story.
Mm-hmm.
And like any other film, a studio film or not, if it's doing well, it'll stay in the cinema.
Okay.
I thought they were only putting it in for 2 weeks so it would qualify for an Oscar nomination, but no, it's still out in cinemas.
The box office, yeah.
And I think if the quality of their work wasn't as good, I would think, no, you are detracting from cinema.
Mm.
But what they're making is they're still very cinematic.
Yeah.
And of course, more and more people are watching. They're not watching these things on small TV screens. They're, you go to people's houses.
Giant TVs.
Yeah,
sure.
Giant TV and projection.
Sure.
But however they're watching it, even if they're traveling to work, watching it on their phones.
Yeah.
They're going to get something from it, and it is being seen.
And maybe they wouldn't have seen it otherwise.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I think it's a good point. It's because it's good. That the quality is there. That it's worth it.
Yeah.
If it weren't, then we would be probably not having that discussion.
Yeah. And they're producing some wonderful documentaries as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot to see. I'm a little busy this time of year.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you are. So you've never seen a film more than you've seen this one of yours.
No.
And is it safe to say this is a campaign? I mean, you've been doing the interviews, like you said, during your Broadway show, you were talking about this movie.
Yeah.
This is the most that you've ever kind of done press for a movie. Right?
Yes, definitely.
And what is that? What is your relationship with that aspect of the job?
It's been, because it's this movie, it's been great.
Okay.
Because I've been traveling with not many other actors. It's just me. Tony's not traveled.
And there's not a lot of other characters in the movie.
No, but I'm traveling with the director and the producer and the writer, who are all fascinating and interesting people to be with.
Cool.
And the film, if the film hadn't been received as well as it's been received, and you were trying to do a hard sell on something, it would be entirely different. But it's the enthusiasm you get from the journalists even. Okay. It's phenomenal.
You don't have to be dishonest in promoting something. Yeah.
No.
Which is good.
Yeah. And this, the subject matter, you can't be dishonest about it. It is what it is. It's all there to see. Right. There's nothing hidden.
Right.
You're not looking at it the right way. It's a comedy. No, it's a multi-layered film that will have resonances with anyone who watches it.
Yeah.
Catholic or not.
Because if you didn't like it, it'd be exhausting to put up an act that you.
Yeah. If I didn't like it, it probably meant it was a bad film, and nobody wanted to see it anyway. But no, it's I'm not doing anything quite on this scale. Usually, it's you go to the press launch. And there's like a 2-day junket where everyone packs into a particular hotel and you talk to round tables and all that thing. And you might get some radio or you might get a TV show. But this, it's involved a lot of traveling, sadly, for the planet. And I think, somewhere down the line we're going to have to address this because there's a lot of people flying around selling their wares.
Okay.
And it could, we're a visual medium and a technological medium, and we should be able to do more from stay at home
remote.
And from a remote.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
This is a conversation that we're all starting to have, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very grateful for the air miles. That's great. But
you're
not so grateful for the damage I'm doing.
You're about to go back to London very soon.
Yeah. What time? I've got to go, actually.
You probably have to go soon. Yes, I have to let you go soon. We're all about advice on this podcast, of course, especially for early career actors. If you could go back in time and give I know you didn't originally want to get into acting, and is it true that you're a teacher submitted your RADA application?
Yeah, well, yes, I was studying art.
Yeah.
And I was doing drama as a subsidiary.
Okay.
Purely because I was told it was the easiest course to do. And I had no interest in theatre, and I was more interested in painting. But I was acting at college, and this tutor from another college who'd been an actor saw me, and he said, "Have you ever thought of being an actor?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, I think you should. And I think you should go to RADA." And so he did. He sent off got the application forms, and he coached me through 2 audition speeches.
Okay.
And I got accepted, and that was the beginning of my real education in theatre and and acting. And I think the one thing that was a couple of the things that were most valuable to me were the voice work. We had voice work, we had diction, we had movement classes, we had Alexander technique.
Oh, cool.
We had improvisation classes.
Okay.
And I was very lucky to work as my improv teacher was Keith Johnson, who is a kind of guru of improv. And all these things like the TV show Whose Line Is It Anyway and improv clubs all come from the games and improvisations that he invented. So he was my teacher. So that was, and the mime teacher who worked with him, Ben Benison.
Oh, very cool.
So that was the best thing that could have happened to me about RADA, was that because my confidence grew and my performance confidence grew. And you weren't afraid of making mistakes or messing up or getting anything. You could make all your mistakes in these improv sessions. And it was only a mistake because they were mostly geared to being funny and getting a punchline at the end of the...
Sure.
You know, it's a gag improv. And then my first job, that was the most important thing. And if you could give advice to a young person to say, well, what you need to do is you all need to go and work at the Everyman in Liverpool under this particular director, because you will be given free rein. You were players cast, so you never have a choice in what you're going to do.
Right.
So I started off playing Elbow, the comic figure in Measure for Measure, the comic policeman. You don't know Elbow?
I don't. I don't know if I know Measure for Measure.
No, Elbow, anyway. And then I was a singer in Caucasian Chalk Circle, the narrator. And you go through, and then, by the end of the season, you're playing Richard III, or you're playing Edgar and Lear, and you're doing lots of new plays written for that company.
Awesome.
And performing to what we knew to be an unsophisticated audience. They weren't necessarily a theatre-going audience.
Okay.
There were two theatres in Liverpool. One was the Playhouse, which, as the name suggests, it was the traditional theatre house, where you'd get kind of West End shows and occasionally new shows and things. And then we were what were we? The lefty, anarchic upstarts who were trying to find a new audience. And that was the best way to start.
Sure. Yeah.
Really was.
Especially coming off of that, sounds like it's much more, you get to be more in the moment and more spontaneous.
But I also had, what was important is that, yes, you can be spontaneous and of the moment, but if you can't be heard, if you can't tell the audience the way you're thinking with your body language or how you relate to another person on stage with the shapes you're making, there's no point. So those classes, at the time, you don't think about it. You think, oh, God, I got another bloody voice class.
Totally, yeah.
But
you don't know that's...
It's maintained me for nearly 50 years.
Because it's in you now. That training is ingrained.
I rarely... You learn how to use your voice. I rarely lose my voice through strain or whatever. You've got a technique which is supporting you all the time. And it was the same when I was an art student. It was a very rigorous education. Yes, you were free to paint and do whatever you wanted, but for 4 hours every Friday we had object drawing.
Okay.
And we would have life classes, and it was that basic work which, you honed your skills and honed your technique. And that's the only advice I would give to young actors.
Yeah.
That and don't be late and join the union.
And join the union,
yeah.
Okay. Don't be late.
Yeah, very important.
That's excellent advice. That's a good practical note to end on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you.
This was lovely.
Thanks.
In the Envelope, an awards podcast, is recorded at Lotus Productions and Hyperbolic Audio in New York City and Soundbox LA, Mark Gross Studios, and Buzzies in Los Angeles. Thanks as always to podcast producer extraordinaire Jamie Muffett, and to the team at Backstage, Samantha Sherlock, Mark Stinson, Caitlin Watkins, and of course, Kasey Howe. Visit Backstage.com, and don't forget, you can subscribe to Backstage by using the code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free trial. That's right, 100% free. For more exclusive content, join us on Facebook and Twitter at In the Envelope, and subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Who would you like us to interview next? Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another glimpse in the Envelope.